Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
For many, many years, experts in the American West have predicted that unless the steady overuse of water was brought under control, the Colorado River would no longer be able to support all of the 40 million people who depend on it. The Colorado's flow has already declined by nearly 20% on average from its flow throughout the 1900s, and if the current rate of warming continues, the loss could well be 50% by the end of this century. Earlier this month, federal officials declared an emergency water shortage on the Colorado River for the first time. Yes, it's no secret we're talking about climate change today, and we're going to look at why is this happening? Is it really climate related, or is there another explanation? We're going to try to entertain both sides of that equation. We're also going to look at, again, a report from the United Nations saying that some climate change effects may be irreversible. Is that the case? And if so, how is that the case? Is there really nothing that can be done? Well, any conversation on the climate simply would not be complete without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, and the irony is right here we are in hurricane season and people being flooded out of their homes and inundated in the Gulf Coast and up the east coast of the United States, and the floods this summer in Central Europe. And now you have, and people are saying, well, we got all this rain. Why is, what are you talking about? It's dry and there's no climate. Yeah, that's the point, folks. You've got the wildfires in California because it's so dry. You have Hoover Dam, which is, at 40% of its capacity and going down. And the point was, in the article, not to, just to give you a little bit of heads up here, the snow last winter was pretty normal. And yet the ground is so dry that it's not enough. It's not catching up at all. It's still losing. And it's just one of these things that you wish you could talk about it all at once and get it out of the way and everybody would go, but we can't. And so that kind of leads into the word of the day, kind of a fun word, but it means all at once or in one lump. And that's holus polus. I love it. It's an adverb.
holus
polus. HOLUSBOLUS. And it's not two words, it's one word. I love it. 4 syllables. Holus bolus. It's an adverb and means all at once or in one lump. And, we wish we could talk about climate and climate change and recycling and conservation and all at once, and everybody would jump on board and we could start to maybe reverse this or take care of things. But we can't, because that's not the way we work. So here we are again, telling you about some things, and hopefully you can share the word. Holus bolus.
Well, Lance, this is one of those times where I almost feel like, it's kind of like you just got to hit people upside the head with a 2x4 every now and then, because, what else do we need to tell you? I mean, the warnings have been here, right? We've been telling people, but the science community has been telling people since the 80s. And this should not be, and I think this is a good indicator that in some countries, like the United States, this has been a politicized issue. Although in other countries, like the United Kingdom, where they have a rather conservative prime minister right now, it is not nearly the political issue that it is here, right? He directly addressed that coal should
I was going to say, I read an article.
Go the way of the dinosaurs,
Yep.
right? We ought to be done with that. No question. Ought to be done. So, and I guess the point that I'm trying to make there is, for those of you listening today, and we know that there are probably a good bit of you, especially if you're listening to us on the radio, that, are skeptical or outright denying that climate change is going on. Here's my challenge today, okay? Rather than take that on head on, just listen to what I'm sharing with you, and then I want you to provide me with the alternative explanation. I don't need you to tell me why this explanation, which we're about to give you, is wrong. What I need you to do is tell me what explanation is there other than this. Because too often, Lance, I think this conversation becomes this thing of, well, we're going to tell you all these things that have happened, and then we're going to tell you why we know that climate change is the cause. And then the counter to that is, well, it's not climate change. Okay, we'll take it your direction. So what is it then? And what do we do about whatever the thing is that you think that it is? And I don't mean for that to be antagonizing. I really am genuinely asking people today, Lance, to do that, because I don't know what that counter is. I'm very open to hearing it, because I would love for this to be something other than climate change that's a heck of a lot easier to fix than climate change. I think that would be stupendous. I would be all for that. But I am yet to see anything that indicates otherwise. So you can send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, as you're listening along. Give that some thought, if you would, please. The New York Times article that we're referencing today, and we'll be referencing a Wall Street Journal article for the UN portion, explains that the Colorado's flow, referring to the river, has already declined, Lance, by nearly 20% on average from its flow throughout the 1900s. And if the current rate of warming continues, the loss could well be 50% by the end of this century. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Colorado's river enormous significance extends well beyond the American West. I mean, you heard me talk about Wyoming down to Arizona over to California. But in addition, it actually provides water for the people of 7 states, 29 federally recognized tribes, and northern Mexico. Its water is used to grow everything from the carrots stacked on supermarket shelves in New Jersey to the beef in a hamburger served at a Massachusetts diner. The power generated by its 2 biggest dams, the Hoover and the Glen Canyon, is marketed across an electricity grid that reaches from Arizona to Wyoming. So it would be safe to say that in one form or another, we are all touched in this country, by the Colorado River. Whether it's you directly depend on its water or its electricity, which is a very real possibility for 40 million Americans, or whether you're like Lance and I, and we don't really need its power, we don't need its water, but we do need its water, right? Because we don't use the water, but the farmers of the West who grow crops to feed the beef cattle across the country, and Lance gets his juicy steak burger, and no more juicy steak burger, because we need a lot of water to grow the crops to feed the beef to get you your burger out here in Ohio. So the point is, right, that there's and all kinds of other things that we eat directly, vegetables, right? So the point is that really it'll have an effect on all of us, because imagine if tomorrow 40 million people suddenly didn't have water or electricity anymore, right? And they happen to be a large portion of those 40 million people happen to live in the great state of California, which, as we know, is what, the 8th or 9th largest economy in the world, all on its own. So whether or not you like the politics of California really doesn't matter, because when you hit a state like that, that's such a huge portion of the United States economy in such a hard way, it's going to affect you no matter what.
Well, and it probably provides a lot of the fruits and vegetables at your local grocery store.
Yep.
So you can't deny of its importance just in the overall scheme, but in your personal life. While I'm not a denier of climate change at all, I'm going to accept your challenge.
Excellent.
Because that's what I always tried to do in the classroom, is argue the other side, even if I didn't believe in it, to try to open people's minds and get a discussion going. One of my, like I said, I believe in climate changes, and you guys can say, oh, well, you're a friendly redneck liberal, and you kind of fall into the trap of believing the scientist, rah, rah, rah. But when you look at the land mass that the Colorado River goes through, historically, there have never been a lot of people live there, because it is an arid region. And the Colorado River was the life support for the few people that could live there. Well, what the United States has done is we are now trying to build cities and metropolises and economies in land that probably shouldn't be taking on people. And I know for years you've made the same argument when you talk about people living on coastal lands with the oceans rising and the bad, weather that's coming in there. And yet that's where everybody wants to live, because when it's not bad weather, it's really nice, and living in Phoenix and Southern California and Las Vegas is really nice when you've got enough water. But is it climate change, or is it that we are trying to produce crops and food and live in regions that don't have enough natural resources to support what we're trying to do there?
It is.
And I say
the answer is yes.
And I say that as a, that counter argument that you're looking for from our audience, and not to steal anybody's thunder, because I'm not sure I'm explaining it really well. But yeah, the Colorado River is going down. Okay. And if it continues, and there's that caveat, right? If it continues
at this rate.
Right. Well, who knows if it does, right? We might all of a sudden, the weather patterns change, and I'm not familiar with the scientific names, but the weather patterns change, and all of a sudden there's a deluge of snow and rain in this portion. And then all of a sudden the Colorado's back in 10 years. I think that's where people go. I think we sell them short and say, oh, they don't believe in this and they don't believe in science. But then you just agreed in sense that there is something to the fact that we're trying to eke food and shelter out of a region that really isn't conducive naturally for that kind of stuff to happen.
Lance, that's a fantastic question, and I don't have enough time to answer it on the fly here, so we're going to answer it at the start of the next segment. What do you guys take this opportunity? What do you guys think, listening right now? What do you think the answer to Lance's question is? Send us an email right now, podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd like to hear from you and to find out the answer to Lance's question. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
All right, so Lance posed a phenomenal question before we left off, and you all were supposed to try to answer it during the break, sending us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. So if you haven't done that already, do it right now, because here's my answer. Lance brought up an important point. I have not made it any secret over the years that I think that as a nation, it is incredibly foolish for us to continue to incentivize people that live in the path of frequent hurricanes, right? And this is, I'm very aware, right? We're in the wake of a major hurricane that hit Louisiana, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but as Lance and I have talked before, frankly, I'm not for giving money to people to rebuild their homes where hurricanes hit regularly, particularly if those homes lie below or at sea level. What kind of sense does that make? I am for, and this is important, don't take this out of context, right? I am for helping those people move to new places. I am all for that. I would be happy to take all the money that we put into the federal housing program to rebuild all these homes, give these people these great low interest loans, or in some cases, just give them the money and there's no strings attached. I would be all for taking that same money and saying, we'll help you go build a new home someplace else or buy a home someplace else. And the thinking is, so the answer is, there never should have been a New Orleans, right? There still should not be a New Orleans, because it is not sensible for people to live in a place where you're not supposed to build houses, where you're not supposed to have a city. Likewise, Lance, the answer here is there should not be a Phoenix, Arizona. That is crazy. You built a major metropolis that's growing, right, faster than any other city in the United States of America in the middle of a desert. And now you're surprised that we might have water issues. well, we didn't have water issues, for the last 30 years. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You just didn't know it because the government was doing everything they could to, pad over it and make it comfortable and let you use what you want as we slowly depleted what naturally would have been coming, which is almost nothing, right? So the counter there, Lance, is, and this is my point, is no, we have manipulated nature and we have deceived ourselves to believe that this is, well, there should be water from the Colorado to support 40 million people. No, there shouldn't. Even if there wasn't climate change, there shouldn't be. That's not what it was designed to do. We've built massive reservoirs, built dams, stopped the natural progress of rivers, all in the name of convincing ourselves that we're supposed to live in the middle of very arid places, right? That naturally, under regular circumstances, would not be suitable for this. And with climate change, are definitely not suitable for this. So that's, I guess, where I'm at is I think there's the natural answer, which is history tells us that these are not places that you should be living. This is not smart. And number two, is even if you don't want to accept the climate change argument, if there is climate change, right, if we just play under that, then it makes number one even dumber. Number one is even more ill-advised if climate change exists. And even if it doesn't exist, it's still pretty stupid. So that's where I'm at. And I'm not calling, just to be clear, I'm not calling the people that live in these areas stupid. I am calling us, the American society, dumb for not saying now, look, we know this. We have people telling us we have to make a change.
For all the wishful thinking, climate science suggests there is no future in the region that does not include serious disruptions to its economy, growth trajectory, and perhaps even the quality of life. So what do we do about this? We've got all these farmers and everything. Well, the article says, what do we do with the survival of the Colorado River, which supports 8% of the nation's GDP? So 8% of our gross domestic product is surrounded the Colorado River. So if you want to make this argument that I'm making, we've created this problem. So now we're going to do about to fix it when there is no long-term solution in sight. We've just been doing all kinds of things. Well, the article says none of these short-term solutions that the government has done is going to fix the problem. None of this will be enough to solve the problem unless it's accompanied by serious efforts to lower carbon dioxide emissions, which are ultimately responsible for driving the changes to the climate. So whether you agree with what I've said or not, or with what Justin said or not, this is the problem. And everybody's saying to solve it and to keep producing all of the things that we produce in this region and to keep these people living in these areas that are growing faster than any other place in America right now. All right. Las Vegas and Phoenix are two of the fastest growing areas in the United States in the last 10 to 15 years, as stated in the article. We have all that and accept it. We still need to do something so that we can continue this. If we're not just going to tell everybody to pack up and leave because there's not enough natural resources for you right now to continue this growth and to even continue producing what you're doing right now. If the growth stopped in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to run out of stuff. So the only answer is, okay, then we need to improve the climate so that more water can come in there, more moisture can come in, so that we can at least hold the same levels that we already have.
And the other thing is, Lance, there are some very sensible things that could be done immediately to at least slow down the problem. Now, I want to include an important caveat to this that's just me. This isn't the article. I'm all for doing these things that the article suggests, which we're about to tell you, okay, that would slow down this issue. I am not for doing them if then after we've slowed it down and in 30 years we have the same problem, we're going to like, oh my gosh, we didn't know this was going to happen. It's like, no, I don't want to do these things and then just say, well, we've done them, so now we don't got to worry about it. No, that buys us time to have a sensible solution to doing something about it. but not to simply push the problem down the road again and say, oh, well, it'll be okay. And, I won't have to deal with it, so somebody else will. Because that to me is just such the antithesis of what the American spirit ought to be. Now, maybe that's not what it is. Maybe it's not about doing the hard thing and doing it well and doing what's required to do what's best for the country. Maybe that's not what we're about. But if it is, this is one of the times where we have to demonstrate that resolve, because we've demonstrated it on serious issues when it's become absolutely necessary at times. But this issue arguably is one that if we don't do something about it, as this other article we're about to talk about notes, there are already certain things which there's no prospect currently today of being able to change, right? No matter what we do, it's not going to change. And that's part of the point of the article, Lance, right? One sentence that stood out. One way or another, farms will have to surrender their water and cities will have to live with less of it. Time has run out for other options. We've already waited too long, right? And that's part of the point of the article. And the couple of things, Lance, for example, flaws in the laws, right? Across the basin, ranchers often take their maximum allocation each year of water, even if to just spill it out on the ground, for fear that if they don't, they could lose the right to take water in the future. So simply remove the change in the law, right? And actually, you could even incentivize people to conserve water. Same thing too. I mean, this one's just so crazy. We've got 2 reservoirs, right, that we maintain, each of which are only about a third full. And about 10% of the flow of the river, which goes into these reservoirs, evaporates off the surface of the reservoirs each year.
Because it's so freaking hot.
Right. And just to put this in perspective, right, last year, 2020, evaporative losses from Lake Mead and Lake Powell alone added up to almost 1 million acre-feet of water.
And the point of the article is there's a way to stop this evaporation process, or at least slow it down.
Yep.
So that, and again, it's nothing that would take a lot of money to do.
No.
It's just would take the lawmakers to address the situation, pass the necessary laws, and then all of a sudden we can conserve the water we have by doing something smart. And again, to your point to open the show, that shouldn't be a political issue. We need water, folks, right? Okay, hey, if we do this, we can save 10% of the water. We can save all the water that you're going to need in the next year if we just do this. And I'm not going to say simple fix, but in the term and the whole thing of the scientist report from the UN, it would be a simple solution for right now to give us time to do things that will help us for the long term.
1 million acre-feet of water wasted every year is unacceptable. And it doesn't have to be. And this isn't a climate debate.
Right. When we have the technology to stop it.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the technology that we're talking about is combine the frickin' reservoirs, because the surface area is substantially less, right? I mean, it's basically half if you combine them. And the other item there, right, is don't just combine them, but cover them. And you say, how are we going to cover a reservoir? Well, guess what? All over the world, they do it all the time in some of the most arid places, because they know if you float, for example, plastic balls across the surface of the water, you can cut 90% of the evaporation of the water simply by shielding it from the sun. So these are not like super high tech, really complicated stuff. It's quit trying to preserve both reservoirs, put them together because there's plenty of space, and cover the frickin' thing so that you don't lose so much water to evaporation.
And it's hard to argue that it's not going to work because, like you said, it's done in other places around the world. So there are examples where people are doing this.
Well, frankly, who cares if it's not going to work? We got to try something. Right. I mean, it's like, the alternative, right? Because that's what I challenged you at the beginning of the show, is come up with an alternative. The alternative is to do nothing and just let the water continue to evaporate off the surface of the reservoirs, which is like, that. What? I mean, that doesn't make sense, but we're doing it. The article ends, Lance, with, well, it doesn't end with, but I think it's the the culmination of it, right? For all the wishful thinking, climate science suggests there is no future to the region that does not include, as you mentioned, serious disruptions to its economy, growth trajectory, and perhaps even quality of life. The uncomfortable truth is that difficult and unpopular decisions are now unavoidable.
I just want to address one point that you made. We need to try something whether it works or not. I don't disagree with that, but my point is we have some things that people are doing around the world and we shouldn't just poo-poo them because, well, we're not doing them here, so it's not good enough for folks. If it's working and somebody else has already done it, that whole age-old adage, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Somebody came up with the wheel, we all just use it, right? If somebody's got something that stops water evaporation and we have a problem with water evaporation in the western part of the United States, then let's put it into place. And every day that we can save some water gives us more time to do some of the things that this UN report that we're going to talk in the next segment about gives us time to implement those so that we can keep people living here. We can keep producing the food. We can keep producing the things that we all need from this region. And it just doesn't dry up and blow away.
There's more to talk about, though. What does the UN report say? And what does your friendly redneck liberal say? Those are both still things to come. Keep it here on State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are the State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The impacts of the climate crisis, from extreme heat to wildfires to intense rainfall and flooding, will only continue to intensify unless we choose another course for ourselves and generations to come, said U.S. climate envoy John Kerry. What the world requires now is real action. From the United Nations report itself, quote, opening lines, "It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe. We've known for decades that the world is warming, but this report tells us that recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, unprecedented in thousands of years."
I think that you just have to, it's logical, right? We as you're lying in bed at night and you're wrapped up in your covers, you get warmer as the night goes on. Okay, it's not because of the covers, it's because of the heat that your body gives off. And then that heat is trapped in the covers and you get warmer. So if we've added all of these people to the planet just because there's more people, we're emanating more warmth. And then you start to look at all of the things we've done and all the trees we've chopped down to build the ships, to travel around the world and find all these different people and decide, well, we want to live here and we're going to take over here. And then, we dig into the ground and we find this stuff that does things that we never were able to do before. And now we can mass produce things with coal-powered plants. And then we look at the Native Americans and they're using this black slick stuff and they're doing all these things with it. And we find out that there's oil and this oil will now do this. And oh my gosh, if we cultivate this oil and it will make us stronger and we can develop these things called plastics, which makes it then easier for life. And we can do all these other things. And why wouldn't all of that development hurt the planet? Because that wasn't going on before. Because you had people at that time had this interaction. When you study the older civilizations, they had this interaction with the planet, with Mother Earth, that we will take what we need to survive and Mother Earth will continue to regenerate what we need. Then the Europeans came along and said, you know what? This is great stuff. If we conquer it and we get all of it and we control it, we can make lots of money and have power over it. That's just, to me, it's a very simple, how would you explain this to a kindergartner? And that's it. When you change your behaviors, the outcome is going to change, either positively or negatively. And in this case, it's a negative change because we're using up things that are infinite.
I'm not sure how to better lay it out for people. I mean, other than to say that, there were not billions of people back then, right? And we did not have gas-powered cars. We did not have electricity grids. We did not have, on and on, right? And you're saying, well, you mean we have to give all that stuff up? No, because as Lance and I have covered on this show before, and this is the thing that's arguably the most frustrating, right? Lance and I, it's kind of like when we talked about COVID, right? Nobody wants COVID to be here. Nobody wants climate change, okay? You're crazy. If you want climate change, you are literally insane. Nobody wants climate change. It's not something that anybody asked for. It's something that we have to deal with because it's here, right? And it's only going to get worse for the foreseeable future. And yes, if we stopped doing everything today, because Lance made this point when we were off air the other day, and I think it's so key, we're feeling the effects from 20 years ago, okay? So, and from 40 years ago and from 50 years ago, because it's a cumulative effect, right? It's not like, oh, well, we did this in 2020, so then in 2021 we feel it. No, that's not how that works. In 2021, we're feeling everything that's been happening for the past 100 years, okay? So even if today we did everything we should do, people are going to be like, well, it didn't change. You're right. It didn't change. It did not change overnight because that's not how the climate works. We're facing this because of the poor decisions that have been made ever since we figured out that this was a real problem, which a lot of times we say, dates back to the 80s. And really, we recently read, really dates back to like the mid to late 50s, the early 60s is when the first scientific writings were coming out definitively saying, hey, there's some kind of problem here. We need to be looking into this. And it wasn't until the 80s that it got kind of serious. And then everybody in the 80s were like, oh, well, we had a bipartisan effort and it kind of fell apart, became partisan. And then, here we are today, right? At least in the United States. And so goes the United States, the world's going to follow, right? Or at least somewhat. And that's kind of why we're in this predicament. So we have to do what's right now in order to hopefully in 20 or 30 years, start to go back in the right direction. And that's a tough sell, and I get that. But nobody wants this. Nobody wants it. And the point that I was getting at, Lance, is you and I have told people before, right? We have the technology today. Is the technology perfect? No, it's not. But we have the necessary technology today to basically stop our component of climate change, right? Mm-hmm. If we wanted to, we could do it. Now, would it cost a lot of money? Yes, it would. Would it require that, some of us get a little uncomfortable and buy an electric vehicle? Yep, it would. But the point is, it's not like we have to have some great scientific awakening, and put another man on the moon. What we have to do is use the things that already exist, that we know are better alternatives than what we've been doing.
Sometimes, and I'll just end with this, sometimes the best solution is the simple one. We don't need to wait on, you don't need to wait on new technology because there is that, right? Well, technology will fix the problem because every time we've had a problem in my lifetime, something has happened with technology that solved that problem or made it easier to do. But sometimes the fix is really simple. It's like the sink is flooding. What do I need to do? Oh my gosh, I need to call a plumber. I need to dig out the whole line. Hey, how about just turn off the faucet? Bam. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Now, are there other things you can do? But sometimes the simple thing is the first step towards solving the problem. And unfortunately, to your point, we're so busy arguing over whether or not it's real. We're not even doing the simple things. And we have to at least start there.
Yep. We can make.
That's all I've got. It's just like, I don't, and again, we want to hear from you. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where we're right. You put your words together well. probably better than us. We can read it on air and have another conversation about this. But we are miffed at why people are looking around and saying, well, it doesn't exist. Okay, then what's causing it? Because we really are. I mean, I gave a couple solutions and arguments just because that's what I did for my career. I came up with things but honestly, folks, I don't have any other answers. It makes sense to me that all of these humans and all the things that we've done to the planet in the last 200-300 years, it makes sense that it would be warming, and that what we understand about weather, that the warming would change the weather patterns. So, and as you increase the population, people are going to have to start living in places that people didn't live before, because otherwise there's overcrowding. And we've done, we did that article about how that brought around disease and killed people, and we had to find ways to stop that. So this just it's logical to me. Tell me what else is logical. Tell me what I'm missing.
The downside is we have to make, some sacrifices, but they're near term. The upside is that we ensure that human civilization can continue to exist on this planet, and that's part of it. It's somebody summed it up well the other day by, saying it's supposedly the thing, right, that separates humans from the rest of the animal kingdom on this planet, is that we have the ability to plan for the future, right? We can internalize and think about our future self and our future society, our future of the species, and we can do things to prepare for it. And yet, we are so very bad at doing that on any kind of consistent basis. And if we don't, it will be our children and grandchildren who will look back and wonder why we hated them. Because they will say, the data was there, they knew it was a problem, they had the means to do something about it, and they didn't.
They didn't have the heart to get it done.
Right. How weak will they think us? How selfish will they think us?
All true.
So why do we have this conversation, Lance?
Well, it's very simple. True Chat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we are glad that you joined us today for that conversation, and hope you join the conversation and have those conversations around the water cooler or the dinner table or wherever you see people. And they say, well, that sounds like a good thing. We ought to talk about these kind of issues. Tell them they can find us, the show, on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. And we're also available not only as a podcast, but also in select talk radio markets around the country on the weekends. So check your local AM and FM station and see if they carry our program. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.